Welcome back to Relay Gun Adventures. So this is Crossman 2250 part 1.5. So I've had another look at it. I've made a discovery. So I'm going to open her up. We're going to have a look. I'm going to strip it down as far as the final breech and valve removal. We're going to see what's going on, see if it has been tampered with, and make a decision from there. Now the good news is, well, good news for me, is that rather than order a valve stem, I ordered a complete valve. Which will be here hopefully in a few days. So that is going to get me over a myriad of potential problems. Anyway, let's cut to the chase. Let's get this thing apart. Be right back. So here we go. This is the Crossman 2250, 2250B. So I'm going to actually disassemble about 90% of this to see what's going on. It's not too difficult and you don't need too many tools for this part. So I'm going to start by taking off the pistol grip assembly and the trigger. Now there is a little trick to that, a little knack, which I'll explain as we get there. Also, I've got a tin to put the bits in that I'm taking out because I don't want to lose them. So I'm going to start by taking off this foregrip. And in this case it's just a couple of Phillips screws. This is to give me access to another screw, which is going to release the pistol grip and trigger assembly. Now also, normally I would loosen off the barrel band before all this, but I don't need to take the barrel off at this stage. And also, I've noticed that there's a screw missing out the barrel band, or a grub screw, so I'm going to replace that when the time comes. So that's off. I'm going to leave the screws in there and just stick it to one side. Now this screw here with the little bracket on, which is for the foregrip, this is one of the screws that holds this whole assembly onto the pistol, and there's another screw just in the back there. Now normally the easiest way to do this is to take the grips off with the rifle section, but I'm not going to do that today because at this particular time I'm not overly interested in getting the valve out. I just want to see what's been going on. Now the screw on this one is very loose indeed. I'll just give that a few turns and I'll do the same here. Now I'm going to flip this back up the right way, and the reason for that is going to become apparent when I actually take this assembly off. Now this screw has been cross threaded by the feel of things, so it seems, oh yeah, all of this has been off before. That was only holding on by a fraction of a thread. So let's just put my finger in there, pinch that up tight, because it's actually spring loaded. Well, it feels spring loaded. You're going to see the little spring in a minute. And this back screw actually goes right through and into the end cap, but it isn't holding the end cap in place. So we're almost there on that one. So if I just tilt that for you. So in here, which is the other side, in here, under the rear sight, is that screw. And that's the one that I'm dealing with now. So normally there's a good bit of thread on these, but that front one has definitely been damaged, which is a sure sign that it's been off and back on again. And it's easily done because these are actually quite hard to re-engage because of the nature of the round surface. It's okay when you've done it a few times. I'm being really careful with this one. I don't really want it to fall out. Okay, feels like that's off. Now normally I would have kept it in this position, but because that front screw was literally hanging on by one or two threads, I couldn't do that, so I've got both of those out. Now I'm going to gently lift this away. Okay, here we go. Pop that down there. Now just there is a tiny spring which I'll just take out. It is absolutely minuscule. and if you lose that, you're in trouble. I'm going to pop that in a tin. Now, even more importantly, underneath that spring there is a tiny ball bearing. Same thing, if you lose that, you will never find it again. So I'm just going to take that out and pop that in the tin carefully. Bit of dirt. And there is, in the palm of my hand, a very small ball bearing, which I'm going to pop into the tin so it's safe. So, ball bearing and spring. Now this part I'm going to put to one side, but before I do, I'm going to have a quick look. Now that does all look pretty much as it should. There is a lot of oil there, and I don't think anyone's actually had that apart and tinkered. The spring and the ball bearing, by the way, are part of the safety assembly. So let's just put this somewhere safe while we work on the rest. This screw here, this is the one that retains the actual valve, but that isn't going to come out until the breech and barrel have been released. And this rear sight, the screw in the top here, goes right the way through into the end cap, and in there is a spring which is under tension, hammer spring, and obviously the hammer as well. So let's just take that off. Let me just show you that. This is a flat screwdriver for this one. Again, that's very loose. I was expecting that to be tighter. And I'm keeping my finger over the end of the end cap so it doesn't fly off anywhere. This is quite a long screw in this one. That feels like it's away, so that's the rear sight assembly. Let's put that in the tin, actually, and let's put these two screws in the lid for safekeeping. Now, if I just release the pressure, you'll see the cap is there, and inside that is the spring, and you can probably see there's a lot of oil on there, a lot more oil than you might expect. Very oily now. Okay, let's have a little look in the end. So this is where your hammer sits. The breech, the bolt, just drop the bolt back actually. There's a tiny Allen screw in there. I think it's about 1.5 millimeters. I'm not taking it out today. I'm not going to go all the way back. This is sort of Crossman 2250 part 1.5. So we're just going to do a bit of further investigation. So much oil, and it does smell very sort of solvent based, which is something of a worry. So a quick recap. You can see the hammer there. The spring I've taken out is the hammer spring. Now they do something which you can replace this cap section with, which allows you to adjust the tension on the spring. It becomes a power adjuster. In fact, I think that's probably standard on some of the high range models, which this isn't one of. Right, there's a scratch just there, so someone's had the valve out, or at the very least undone the valve screws. Let's have a little feel of that. How tight is that? That's tight. See, I'm now wondering if somebody was perhaps trying to increase the power and has fiddled with the valve unsuccessfully. Well, the good news is I've ordered a complete new valve assembly, and that came in at around about £20, as opposed to I think about £7 or £8 including postage for the valve stem. So that will include the valve stem, the valve body, and all of the seals. So that, I think, is going to solve the problem relatively inexpensively. I wonder what they were up to. They've lost the bottom screw for the barrel band. That's missing, that's gone. Normally I would take off the barrel band, take off the barrel. it's so much easier to work with without the barrel in place. That's full of oil too, and that wasn't full of oil a couple of days ago when I looked. So we've got a suspicious looking situation where I think somebody's been attempting to modify the valve, or successfully modified the valve, but also succeeded in breaking the rifle. So there we are, we're down to the bare bones. So the next stage would be to take off the breech, which requires that tiny Allen screw to be removed. It's a plastic breech. It's a very straightforward process with these. The metal breech I prefer, and it has an extra fixing. That is very slack, so that could just be down to the sheer volume of oil in there. It probably is, if I'm honest. Can't see any, apart from that scratch where someone's undone the screw, I can't see any obvious signs of interference. To get to this part, all this comes out anyway, so we'll have to have a look at that. Okay, right, so we'll put it back together in reverse order, and as soon as that valve arrives, I'll do a complete strip down. I'll swap the valve over. You can see how straightforward and easy it's going to be. I just thought it's been probably a couple of weeks since I said I was going to do this, and I should at least do something of an update and catch up video. And what better way to do it than to strip this thing down. And of course it's showing me now that this has been a part before. The thing that alerted me to that was the missing grub screw from the barrel band. Although that doesn't necessarily mean it's been a part, it just means someone's been playing with it. But this has definitely been a part, and the nature of the problem with the leaking stem seal and the fact that the valve has been out means that either someone's already tried to repair it unsuccessfully, or the reason it's leaking is they've made some kind of modification unsuccessfully. And there are a number of modifications you can make to the valve which will increase the power, and I'll talk about that. In fact, once I've got this valve out, if it's not damaged or beyond any reasonable repair, then I will modify the valve, and I'll show you how to do that. These are rated at around about £7.5. The XL is rated about £8.5. You can quite easily bring this up to the £8.5 mark with some very simple mods. Maybe that's what they were trying to do, and it didn't work. Okay, so in the back there is our hammer. So I'm going to reinstall the hammer spring and the cap. The holes in the cap need to line up, and they're different if you look at them. Slightly different, so you have to get it the right way around. There's only one way to find that out, and that's to put the screw in and see if it works. I guess you could mark it. So we're going to take our rear sight, which is the thing that holds that in position. I've still got my tiny ball bearing and my spring in the tin. I'm keeping that separately, and I'm keeping that nice and safe over there. So let's get this back in. There's a recess in the hammer which takes the spring, and you'll feel that just drop into place. We can look at the bottom to see that our hole is lined up, and we can pop the sight back on, complete with rear screw. And once that's sitting in there, just tighten that screw back up gently. Now it might need a little bit of it doesn't, but sometimes I need to be jiggled around to get them to line up. Now it doesn't take a great deal to get that in. Please, at this stage, don't go mad and over tighten things. They just need to be tight enough to hold together. Out of the factory, quite often they are very tight. Okay. Now, I'm just going to reinstate the pistol grip and trigger assembly, which requires the spring and ball bearing to be refitted. So I'm just going to cut for a second and get some of this grease off my hands. Be right back. Okay, we're back. Now, if you look at the pistol grip, should be enough light to get an idea of what's going on there. You can see the tiny recess. Now when you take out the spring and the ball bearing, remember where they came from, and bear in mind they're part of the safety assembly, which makes it much easier to find the right place to put them. So I'm going to sit that up for a second, and I'm going to get my ball bearing first, because that needs to go in. Oddly, the ball bearing and the spring have found each other in the tin. There we go. Let's separate those off. Alright, first thing to do is pop the ball bearing back in and follow that up with a spring. And we're going to do that, actually before I do that, let me just move that tin over there. Do that gently, and we're also looking to be very careful about putting this back on to the rifle itself. So start with the ball bearing, be sure it's gone in, and the same with the spring. Now with the spring, this is quite greasy, so what might happen is it might decide to stick to my finger and hop back out as I release it. No, we're okay. Right, so we're now going to re-engage. You can see the mechanism on the top of the pistol. That needs to go back into the slot that it came from, and we just need to line those holes up. It's best to do this before you turn the gun over to tighten the screws. Now don't turn the gun all the way over to tighten the screws, because that's when you're at the highest risk of losing the spring and the ball bearing. Now that's sitting reasonably comfortably. Try to get that so as it's relatively level. Pop that in the back. I've laid it down so as I can see what I'm doing, and hopefully you can see what I'm doing too. And I'm just going to try and get a couple of threads on this rear screw. Okay, that's the back one in. Right, the front one on mine is cross-threaded, so I've only got a couple of threads that will grip. I've got it started, and I'm just going to see if I can gently... No, that's it. It's not going anywhere. So that is now, apart from my wobbly handle, the actual grip and trigger assembly are refitted. I've got my spring and ball bearing in there. I've got my tiny little tab on, which I'll just straighten up a little bit. So I'll drop this back into position. Come on, there you go. That sits over there nicely. Okay, let's get the right screwdriver and put it on the right setting. So we just tighten those back up, and that's the foregrip back on. Now, having cross-threaded screws, having things that have got heads burred over, and actually looking, that tiny Allen screw in the breech looks like that's been damaged as well, so that's going to prove difficult to get out. I'm still going to do this. I'm still going to get this going, and I'm still going to modify the valve if I can, and I'll do another video installing the modified version. But for now, it's back together, and as you can see, that was very difficult. Now ideally, in that position, everything's much easier to work on. It's kind of self-supporting once the rear sight's back on. It balances nicely once the rifle stock's back on. There comes a point in the assembly and disassembly where it's unbalanced and it's not very stable. We're past that, and we now have a fully assembled 2250B. Now there's a couple of things that I want to look at on this. Now I thought this had been possibly dropped. I had a bash. So there's a chunk missing out of the grip here. What I think's actually happened is they've tried to remove, because these are captive screws, they've got a bit of lock thread on. So the idea is these don't come out because this is a rifle and it's overpowered for a pistol. So someone's tried to take these off, and in doing that they've broken that part of the grip. I can repair that, and I will repair that. I'll also show you how to take these off. Not so as you can turn your rifle into a pistol, but so as you know how to replace your rifle stock or give it repair if it needs it. The trigger on this doesn't seem to be modified at all, which is the usual place to start if you're going to do a modification. It looks like someone's had a go at the valve, so it's a good thing that I'm getting a complete new valve assembly, complete with all the seals. I'm sure that will fix this and it will be a usable little CO2 rifle again. And for 20 quid it's not bad. So that's it for today. We've had it apart as far as we want to. Next video we'll go all the way down, so what I'll do is I'll start that probably from the point that I've left this one at. Get into the breech, take off the barrel, take out the hammer, take out the valve, replace the valve, reassemble the whole thing, hopefully without losing any parts, and then we'll give it a test fire. This does actually fire, I have tried it, and it's not bad. It chronoed at just shy of 7 FPE. Leaking, that's not bad at all. Definitely something's going on with that valve, definitely. So yeah, to say that it's busted was probably an understatement. Anyway, let's wind this one up. So there we go. Tools for that. You need some Allen keys, although I didn't use any today because everything's burred over. This is a small slotted or flat-ended screwdriver. It's actually an electrical one. It's case hardened, it's pretty good. And then for the Phillips screws, that is a number 2 posi in my ratchet screwdriver, which is always handy. You shouldn't need anything else. To be fair, you should be able to do most of this with a Phillips screwdriver and a set of Allen keys, but because this has been butchered, shall we say, it's a little more difficult. And also that makes doing things back up difficult because you haven't got much of a head to engage into to actually tighten them. And you can see, you probably can see that screw head there has been distorted where someone's tried really hard to get that out unsuccessfully and broken the grip. Right, let's stop moaning. It's a good little rifle. It's going to be an even better little rifle when it's working properly, and I'll be back very soon. I'll do a quick roundup at the end, I think. Be right back. Okay, so that's it. That's the 2250 stripped down, reassembled. Now the only thing we didn't do is take off the breech, the barrel, then remove the hammer and the valve, which I'll save for part 2.0. Anyway, I've got some bits to organise, plans to make and things to do. So that's it for today. I'll see you all again soon. Please like and subscribe, comment, any questions, please put them in there. Any advice, put it in there. I'm always happy to have a look. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.